Zayden Lowell wasn't supposed to be at the wedding. He hated these things. But when his cousin begged him to show up to the ceremony of the year, he figured one appearance in a tux wouldn't kill him. What he didn't expect was her. She wasn't dressed like the women who usually chased him with fake laughs and designer heels bought with someone else's card. No, the woman in the periwinkle dress standing barefoot on the stone path, just outside the beachside reception, looked like she'd wandered in from another world entirely. And when she laughed full and real, it hit Zayden somewhere in his chest he didn't even know existed. "Harlow Emerson," she said, extending a hand when their eyes met and the air shifted. "I'm the bride's friend, +1 to absolutely no one." "Zayden," he replied, taking her hand. "Cousin of the groom. Billionaire, apparently. According to the seating chart, I'm also alone." She raised an eyebrow. "Billionaire, huh, that's not something people usually drop in the first 5 seconds." "I'm not most people," he said, and for once it wasn't a line. She tilted her head slightly, studying him like she wasn't quite sure what to make of him. "And you don't look like someone who enjoys weddings." "I don't." "Then why are you here?" "My cousin threatened to name his firstborn after me if I didn't show." "I had no choice." Harlow laughed again. It was a warm, unfiltered sound that made Zayden forget about the champagne flute in his hand, the drone of the string quartet, the perfectly coordinated chaos behind them. "You hate weddings, but you came anyway," she said, nudging his arm lightly. "That's kind of sweet." "No one's ever called me sweet before," he said dryly. "Well, don't get used to it." The sun dipped lower, casting everything in gold. Zayden found himself ignoring the waitstaff offering him another glass and instead watched as Harlow slipped her heels back on and brushed sand from her dress. "Dance with me," he said suddenly, her eyes widened. "There's no music yet." "I don't care." He held out his hand. "We'll make our own." She hesitated barely a second and then took his hand. They moved slowly under the open sky, the ocean murmuring nearby, her hand fitting perfectly in his. Zayden didn't do this. He didn't get swept up in things he couldn't control, and he definitely didn't dance with strangers at weddings. But something about Harlow felt different, real. "Let me guess," she said as they moved. "You're one of those guys who thinks feelings are a liability." "No," he said. "I think feelings are dangerous, but I'm not afraid of them." She smiled up at him. "That's a better answer than I expected." He looked down at her, her brown eyes shining in the sunset, and something shifted in his chest. He didn't know what it was, but it didn't feel dangerous. It felt right. They ended up sitting together for dinner at a corner table far from the main crowd. Zayden barely touched his truffle risotto, too caught up in Harlow telling him about her job at a nonprofit helping kids from low-income families get into college. "I don't make much," she said, shrugging. "But it matters. That's more than I can say for half the things I've done before." He admired the way she said it like it wasn't some noble brag, just her truth. "You ever think about doing something else?" "Sure, but I don't want to sell my soul for a paycheck." "No offense, Mr. Billionaire." "Zayden," he corrected gently, his voice low. "And none taken." She studied him again like she was trying to see past the slick tux and the wealth she clearly didn't care about. "You don't seem like someone who's happy." He blinked. "What makes you say that?" "You look like someone who's always waiting for the next thing to go wrong." He didn't reply. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The distance between them was small, just a breath, but it pulsed with something electric. "I'm sorry," she added quickly. "That was too much." "No," he said. It was honest. They kept talking until the candles burned low and the DJ packed up. Neither of them really noticed when the bride and groom had their send-off. By then, the only thing Zayden could focus on was how much he didn't want the night to end. Outside the venue, under a canopy of stars, he turned to her. "Can I see you again?" he asked. She hesitated. "You don't even know me." "I know I want to." Harlow bit her lip, then gave a small nod. "One dinner, no assistants, no private jets, just you," he grinned. "Deal?" As she walked toward her rideshare, she turned back once, her eyes locking with his. Zayden stood there, hands in his pockets, heart beating in a way it hadn't in years. He didn't know it yet, But that night at a wedding he never wanted to attend, he just met the woman who would change everything, and eventually capture his heart. Zayden didn't usually wait for people. He didn't wait for meetings, for investors, or for women. But 5 days after the wedding, he found himself pacing in front of a modest Mediterranean cafe in the West Village, checking his watch more times than he cared to admit. When Harlow finally arrived, dressed in a navy wrap dress and holding a battered leather notebook, she didn't apologize for being late. She just looked up at him with a calm, unreadable expression and said, "You're early." He opened the door for her without replying. The place was tiny, the kind of spot where the owner knew your name and the specials weren't written down. They were seated near the window, the scent of garlic and lemon wafting from the open kitchen. "You really came," she said after they were handed menus. "You sound surprised." "Well, I figured someone like you gets distracted easily." He looked up from the wine list. "Someone like me, rich, busy, probably booked 6 months out. I cleared my schedule. For me, for this," he said, then paused. "I wanted to see where this goes." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she flipped open her notebook, revealing pages filled with scribbles, clippings, and rough sketches. "I'm working on a project for the nonprofit. We're launching a college prep toolkit for first-generation students. I spend most of my nights buried in this." He leaned in. "Show me." She looked surprised but turned the notebook so he could see. There were notes about scholarship resources, breakdowns of essay writing strategies, even a section on how to apply for financial aid without parental support. "You made all this, with a few volunteers. We're hoping to get it into public libraries by fall." Zayden studied the pages. "You thought I'd be bored by this?" "I thought you'd pretend to care and then check your watch," she said plainly. "I don't fake interest." She gave a small nod, then closed the notebook. "Why did you really come?" He leaned back, the question catching him off guard. "Because I haven't stopped thinking about you." The waiter arrived, breaking the moment. They ordered grilled sea bass for her, lamb with saffron couscous for him, and when he left, the silence between them felt heavier somehow. "I'm not looking for entertainment," Harlow said, folding her napkin across her lap. "And I'm not impressed by money. That's not what I'm offering." "Then what are you offering, Zayden?" He hadn't prepared for that. He was used to deals, not declarations, but he didn't look away. "Time," he said finally. "Attention. Something real." She studied him, and when the food arrived, they ate quietly for a while. The cafe's owner stopped by their table to greet Harlow warmly, asking how her scholarship kids were doing. Zayden noticed how easily she fit here, how the staff knew her order before she said it, how she belonged. After dinner, they walked through the narrow streets, the city buzzing around them. It was the kind of night that made everything feel possible. "I don't bring people into my life lightly," she said as they stopped near a small fountain surrounded by ivy-covered walls. "Neither do I. I've seen people change when they realize what you have. I've lost friends over it, relationships too. I don't want to impress you with what I own. I want to show you who I am without it." She looked at him then, really looked. "Then tell me something no one else knows," he thought for a moment. "I dropped out of Columbia 3 weeks before graduation." Her brows lifted. "Why? My father died unexpectedly. I flew home for the funeral and never went back. I told everyone I finished, even put it on my bio." He paused. "It's not the kind of thing that plays well in boardrooms." She didn't judge, didn't try to comfort him either. What would he have said about that? He would have said I should have stayed. But then he would have told me to stop brooding and go build something. "Did you?" "I built an investment firm, took a lot of risks, some of them paid off." She nodded slowly. "And the ones that didn't?" "I don't talk about those." They stood there for a while, the soft sound of the fountain filling the silence. "I should get home," she said finally. "I have an early meeting with one of our students. I'll walk you." She hesitated. "You don't have to." "I want to." They walked side by side until they reached a quiet brownstone lined with flower boxes. She turned toward him on the steps. "I don't know what this is," she said, "but it's not nothing." "It's not," he agreed. She looked like she wanted to say more, but instead she just nodded and went inside. Zayden stood under the street lamp for a few minutes after the door closed behind her, staring up at the windows. Something about tonight had shifted the ground beneath him. He wasn't sure what it meant yet, but he knew one thing: he wasn't walking away. Zayden hadn't planned to see her again so soon. But when he stepped into the Midtown Conference suite for a charity roundtable 3 days later, and spotted Harlow across the room in a tailored navy blazer and low block heels, standing by a table of educational pamphlets, something in him locked into place. She looked different here, more focused, sharper. Surrounded by people in suits and lanyards, she was in her element, flipping through a folder while discussing something intently with a woman in horn-rimmed glasses. She hadn't seen him yet. He didn't interrupt, not immediately. Instead, he watched as she pointed to a chart, her hands moving with purpose. This wasn't the woman from the wedding or the quiet dinner in the cafe. This was a force, unapologetically driven, and he found himself unable to look away. When she finally turned and caught him watching, her brows lifted in surprise. "You're a donor?" she asked once he approached. Zayden shook his head. "Panelist. Economic impact of grassroots education initiatives." "I didn't realize you did things like this," she said, adjusting the strap of her bag. "You don't exactly scream community workshop." "I don't scream anything," he said, "but I listen." She nodded once, then gestured around. "Welcome to the chaos. Looks like you're running it. I'm coordinating one of the student success booths. We're trying to get support for a mentorship pilot this fall." "What do you need?" he asked. Harlow blinked. "You haven't even heard the pitch." "I don't need to," he replied. "If you're behind it, it's worth hearing." She exhaled, then pulled a binder from her tote and opened it to a page with a budget breakdown. "We want to pair first-gen high schoolers with college students for weekly academic check-ins. We've got volunteers, but we need tech support, secure platforms, tablets, transportation stipends. It's not a flashy program, but it's effective." "How much?" "50,000 to launch across 3 districts." He looked at the page for a beat before meeting her eyes. "Done." The word landed heavily between them. Her voice was quiet. "You don't even want to negotiate?" "No." He pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to her. "Have your program director contact my office. We'll wire funds by Friday." She stared at the card, then back at him. "You didn't come here to do this. You came here for a panel." "I came here because I was scheduled to speak," he said. "I stayed because I saw something worth investing in. You can't just throw money at everything that moves you." "I don't, but this isn't a donation." "It's a start." Her jaw tensed for a moment, and then she looked away, scanning the room. "This kind of help, it usually comes with expectations. I don't want credit. Everyone wants something." Zayden leaned in slightly. "I want you to succeed." She looked at him then, truly looked, as if trying to measure the weight behind the words. "You're impossible to read." "That's because most people stop reading before the second page." Before she could respond, a volunteer called her name from across the room. She glanced toward the cluster of students gathering near her booth. "I have to go." "I'll walk with you." As they made their way across the space, Harlow brushed her fingers against the edge of a table, aligning a stack of flyers without breaking stride. "People like you don't usually make time for this level of groundwork." "I didn't grow up with what I have now," he said. "Neither did I." They stopped near a group of teenagers gathered around a laptop. One of the girls looked up from the screen. "Miss Emerson, we've got a glitch with the video module." Harlow crouched beside her immediately, scanning the interface. "Try switching the browser. Sometimes it freezes on Safari." Zayden watched her move between the students with ease. She didn't lecture, she guided. And they listened not because they had to, but because they trusted her. After a few minutes, she stood and turned toward him. "This is why I do it. These kids are the reason I don't sleep. You shouldn't have to choose between doing good and having help." Her expression softened. "No one's ever said that to me before." He stepped closer. "Then maybe you've been talking to the wrong people." The silence that stretched between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was charged, full of things unspoken. "I can't offer Flash," she said finally. No gala appearances, no press releases with your name on a banner. I don't want flash, he said. I want you. She hesitated, her breath catching just slightly. You barely know me. Then let me. Before she could respond, another call of her name pulled her attention. She looked toward the students again, then back at him. Come back Saturday. We're hosting a community info day. I'll be there. She turned, walking back toward the booth, her ponytail swinging behind her, her posture straight and sure. Zayden stayed a moment longer, watching. Not to admire, but to understand, this wasn't going to be easy. She wasn't the kind of woman who could be won with gifts or swept away with charm. He'd have to show up, over and over. And he would. Because the more he saw of her, the more he realized Harlow wasn't just a spark, she was the match. And now that he'd felt the fire, there was no going back. The rooftop was quiet except for the low hum of the city below. String lights were strung across the pergola, casting a soft glow over the dark wood beams and potted citrus trees. It wasn't a restaurant or a venue or even a members-only club. It was Zayden's private rooftop, the top floor of a building most people couldn't even enter without a fingerprint scan. Harlow stood at the edge, looking out at the skyline. She wore a pale gold blouse tucked into high-waisted black trousers, her hair swept back in a way that made her look both effortless and unmistakably striking. You had this built for events, she asked, not turning to face him. No, Zayden said, stepping beside her. I built it for peace, she glanced at him. This isn't what I expected when you said you wanted to talk. We've talked, he said. Now I want you to see something. He gestured toward the far end, where a low table had been set with grilled vegetables, fresh baked bread, and 2 steaming clay pots of saffron rice and roasted fish. No servers, no floral centerpieces, just warmth and quiet. Did you cook this? She asked, raising an eyebrow. I hired someone who could, but I chose the menu. Her mouth curved slightly, not in amusement, but in something softer. Why? Because I remember you said your family used to make tagine on Sundays. I thought maybe this would feel familiar. She looked at the table, then back at him. You remembered that? I've remembered everything. The wind picked up slightly, stirring the leaves. Harlow crossed her arms, not out of cold but reflex. You didn't bring me here just to eat, she said. No, she waited, watching him. Zayden exhaled, his shoulders squaring. I've spent my life building things that could be measured: companies, portfolios, assets. But none of it ever made me feel like I was building something that mattered. You think I can change that? I think you already have. Her expression shifted, something flickering in her eyes. You don't even know what I'm doing half the time. I don't need to understand every detail to see how you move through the world, he said. You make things better just by showing up. She didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, she walked toward the table and sat, folding her napkin slowly. I've been offered things before, Zayden, she said quietly. Help, money, influence, but it always came with a leash. This doesn't. It's hard to believe that. Then let me prove it, she studied him. For the first time since they met, she looked uncertain. I'm not good at letting people in, she admitted. I don't trust easily. I don't expect you to. He sat across from her, voice steady. But I'm not going anywhere, a pause. Then, more quietly, even if it doesn't work, especially then. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. She reached for a slice of bread, tearing off a corner and dipping it into the stew. This tastes like home. I hoped it would. They ate slowly, the conversation drifting from childhood memories to books they'd never finished, to mistakes neither of them had ever said aloud. After the meal, Zayden walked her to the elevator. The city lights sparkled behind her, but she wasn't looking at them. She was looking at him. I've been trying to figure out what this is, she said, and I think I finally get it. He waited, saying nothing. You don't want to fix me. Or change me, you just want to stand beside me. Yes, he said, exactly that. She stepped closer. That's rare. So are you. She kissed him then, soft, certain, not rushed, not reckless, just a quiet surrender to something that had been building between them since the night of the wedding. When she pulled back, her fingers still touched his collar lightly. I'm not going to disappear in the morning, she said. I wasn't worried. She smiled fully then, the first real one he'd seen from her that night. Good. They rode the elevator down together, hand in hand. Over the next few weeks, things didn't get easier, they got truer. Zayden showed up to the mentorship pilot's first launch day, not in a suit, but in rolled sleeves and casual shoes, helping carry folding chairs and set up laptops. Harlow visited his office late one evening, bringing dinner in a paper bag and sitting cross-legged on his couch while he reviewed a case file for an upcoming acquisition. He didn't hide his world from her, and she didn't shrink herself to fit into it. One night she brought him to a poetry reading held in the back of an old bookstore. The room was cramped, the mic crackled, and the folding chairs wobbled, but Zayden sat through every word, one hand resting against her knee beneath the table. Weeks turned to months. The rooftop saw more dinners. More laughter. Less distance. Then one Sunday morning, as the sun filtered through the sheer curtains of his penthouse, Harlow stood barefoot in his kitchen, stirring coffee with one hand and holding a draft of her mentorship grant proposal in the other. Zayden walked in, still in sweats, and leaned against the counter. "You haven't read the last page," she said, not looking up. "I was waiting for you to finish editing. I want you to see it now." He took the pages, scanned the final paragraph, and stilled. "You added my name to the sponsor list. You earned it. I told you I didn't want credit. You didn't ask for it. That's why you deserve it." He looked at her then, the morning light catching the curve of her cheek, and for the first time since they met, he let himself say what he had been holding in his chest since the wedding. "I love you." She froze for a second, coffee forgotten. "I mean it," he added, setting the pages down. "I don't know when it happened, but I know I haven't felt this way before, and I don't ever want to feel something else." Her voice was soft. "Say it again." He stepped closer. "I love you, Harlow Emerson. And I want to build something with you, something no one can measure, but everyone will feel." She reached up, threading her fingers through his. "I love you too." They stood there, wrapped in the kind of silence that didn't need filling. Later that spring, at a community gala hosted by her nonprofit, Zayden took the stage during closing remarks. He spoke not about his wealth or his investments, but about what it meant to find something that gave all of it purpose. And then, in front of a room full of people who once saw him as unreachable, he turned to Harlow and said, "This woman changed the way I live, and I only have one question left." He stepped down, ring in hand, heart in his throat. Harlow gasped, tears already in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered before he even asked. The room erupted in applause, but for Zayden the world had quieted. He'd gone to a wedding expecting nothing, and found everything. The rain came during the final walkthrough of the new mentorship center, a gentle, persistent drizzle that tapped against the tall windows like it had been invited. Harlow stood in the middle of the main room, her arms crossed loosely as she turned in a full circle, taking in the freshly painted walls, the shelves being stocked with donated books, the charging stations being wired for the tablets that had been ordered last month. Zayden watched her from the doorway, leaned slightly against the frame. His blazer was draped over one arm, the sleeves of his button-down rolled just past his elbows, damp at the edges. "You're going to wear a hole in the floor," he said. She turned halfway toward him, her mouth curving just enough to soften her expression, but not enough to qualify as a smile. "I can't help it. This place feels too good to be real." "It's real," he said. "And it's yours, our students," she corrected. "But I know what you mean." He stepped toward her, the echo of his shoes muffled by the new carpet. "You think they'll like it, they'll love it," she said, glancing toward the whiteboard wall that had just been installed. "It gives them space to think. And believe they deserve that space." He nodded, then reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "I wasn't going to give this to you until the opening next week, but I don't want to wait." She raised an eyebrow but took it, unfolding the flap carefully. Inside was a single sheet printed on thick cream paper. She read the heading aloud. "Founding Director Harlow Emerson." Her eyes scanned the line beneath it. "Endowed by the Lowell Foundation." Her gaze lifted. You named it after yourself, I didn't, he said. It's your name on the plaque. The foundation's just the vehicle. She looked down at the paper again. You created a foundation for this, for you, for what you've built. Her fingers tightened around the page. Zayden, this is permanent, he finished. No strings, no expiration. You won't have to scrape every year to keep the lights on. The funding will last as long as the building does. Her voice was quieter than before. You didn't tell me you were doing this. I wanted it to be a surprise. She set the page down on the nearest table and walked to him slowly until they stood toe to toe. You do realize you've completely ruined my ability to be mad at you ever again. I can live with that. She reached up and touched his face, her thumb brushing just under his jaw. You keep showing up in ways no one ever has. I'm not going anywhere. Her kiss was firm this time, not questioning, not hesitant. It was the kiss of someone who knew exactly what they were claiming and who they were giving in return. Later that evening, after the last of the volunteers had left and the doors were locked, they sat on the floor of the unfinished reading room, legs stretched out, a half-eaten box of takeout between them. Harlow leaned back against a stack of unopened beanbags. You know what I keep thinking about? What? That night at the wedding, I almost didn't go. I'd had a terrible day and I told myself I'd just make an appearance and leave before dessert. Zayden looked over at her, the corner of his mouth lifting. I wasn't supposed to be there either. I canceled twice before my cousin guilted me into it. She nudged his leg with hers. So basically, fate's a pushy wedding planner, he laughed, full and low, and persistent. Rain still tapped at the windows when they left the center. Zayden held the umbrella over both of them as they walked to the car, the streetlight catching in the puddles like gold. In the months that followed, the mentorship center opened to full enrollment. The students came in waves, some shy, some loud, all of them full of more potential than they knew what to do with. Harlow ran the place like it was a living thing, adjusting, growing, evolving. Zayden visited often, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with new leads for partnerships, and once with the mother of a student he'd mentored years ago who now wanted to volunteer. They didn't need to question what they had anymore. It had become a rhythm: shared calendars, quiet mornings, late dinners after long days. He brought balance to her fire, and she brought clarity to his ambition. One spring morning, with the windows open and a breeze running through the kitchen, Zayden set down 2 mugs on the island. Harlow padded in barefoot, eyes still soft from sleep. You have a meeting in 20 minutes, she said, sipping the coffee he handed her. I moved it. She blinked. Why? He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Because I didn't want to do this between appointments. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I know we're already building a life, but I want to make it official, he said. Marry me, let's stop waiting for the right moment and just make it ours. She didn't hesitate. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger right there in the kitchen, with the scent of toast in the air and the city waking up outside their window. Their wedding was quiet, held in the mentorship center's courtyard on a Saturday in late May. Students served as ushers. Harlow wore a simple cream dress and Zayden stood beside her in navy, his hand steady in hers. There were no press releases. No headlines. Just vows spoken under a canopy of string lights surrounded by people whose lives they had touched together. Afterward, Harlow leaned in, lips brushing his ear. You know what I see when I look at you, he turned to her. What? Home. He kissed her slowly, deliberately, as applause swelled behind them. They spent their honeymoon on a quiet island off the coast of Greece, not because it was extravagant, but because it was quiet. They read books, swam in the sea, and talked about everything and nothing. There were no calls, no meetings, just them. When they returned, life didn't change dramatically, but it deepened. They woke together, worked side by side, and returned to each other every night with the kind of certainty neither had ever known before. Years later, their names would be etched in the cornerstone of the center's expansion wing. And students would still talk about the woman who never stopped believing in them, and the man who believed in her first. But long before that, before the legacy and the accolades, there was just a rain-soaked wedding, a dance with no music, and two people who hadn't meant to fall in love only to find that once they had, there was no turning back. They were each other's beginning, middle, and end. And they never let go.